Daniel chapter 11, we're looking at verse 40. Daniel 11, we're looking at verse 40. Daniel chapter 11, verse 40. This is where we left off. We're going to pick it up right here. Daniel 11, verse 40. Now, in our previous study, can we remember we looked at two powers, the king of the north and the king of the south. Can you remind me who was the king of the north? It's the papacy. Who was the king of the south? Yes, Egypt. Egypt. Literally, the king of the south controlled the territory of Egypt. But Egypt stood for what principles did Egypt stand for? Atheism. So when we are looking at the king of the north, we are looking at the papacy. When we are looking at the king of the south, we are looking at the spirit of atheism or communism. It's one of the same things. Communism rejects God. Atheism rejects God. There is no God. So we saw in our last week's study specifically the predominant communistic nation is China. It's specifically China. We looked at the collapse of the Soviet Union, Russia, Daniel 11:40, how that was fulfilled in the Cold War. Remember what Gorbachev was called, Time magazine. Can you remember what we showed the article? What did Time magazine call Gorbachev, who was the ruler of the Soviet Union? Time magazine called him the czar of the world's atheism. In other words, Time magazine acknowledged him as the king of atheism. Very interesting. And Time magazine went on to say that communism battled against the immovable form of Christianity. So the world acknowledged there was a war between the papacy and communism. And they basically said Christianity, which is not true Christianity, but the papacy came out victorious. How did the papacy come out victorious? Fighting communism. We looked at it last week, our last study. How did the papacy, because communism was a superpower, how did it collapse? Yes, papacy, but what was the tool of the papacy?
The Vatican.
Yeah, yes, it's the Vatican. What did the Vatican, who united with the Vatican to overthrow communism? It was Ronald Reagan, the United States of America. We saw that. It called it the Holy Alliance, where these two powers came together to overthrow communism, which Gorbachev actually said that had it not been the unification of the Pope with Ronald Reagan, he says that communism would have not collapsed. He said, had it not been for the Pope. So he confessed that. So we saw Daniel 11, verses 40 in its fulfillment with the fall of the Soviet Union. What year was that? We looked at the year? Yes, 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed. Now, when the Soviet Union collapsed, then it made America the sole superpower. The sole superpower. However, we also looked at another rising power. That when the Soviet Union went down, the USSR, there's another power that has been ever growing, which holds to the same principles of the Soviet Union, which is communism. Which nation is that? Let's see. Which nation is that holds to that principle of communism? I read this, I read it again. It says, the annual threat assessment of the U.S. intelligence community, dated February the 7th, states that communist China and Russia are the top two threats to U.S. national security. Question, who does America see as their top enemy? China and Russia. Now, question, I want to see if we are paying attention. Question, which three nations we looked at in our previous study? Besides China and Russia, we looked at three nations which were trending in the news. I just spoke of the one right now. Venezuela? Venezuela? Which is the other nation he wants to control? Greenland? And obviously now Iran. Which three? We looked at all three nations. Can you tell me why is Trump going after all three nations? Please, we looked at all three nations and we looked at what's behind those nations. It's not so much the nations itself, but there's something behind that is trying to prevent.
Because China has...
Thank you so much. China, who was the biggest buyer of Venezuela's oil? China. Which nation did Trump say he wants to prevent? That's why he wants Greenland. Which nation he mentioned by name? He mentioned China. Now question, which is China's last stop to stop America? Iran's is last stop. China's last stop to stop America is Iran. Why? The biggest buyer of Iranian oil is who? China. See, when you just look at geopolitics and you don't understand Bible prophecy, the king of the north, king of the south, you'll just scratch your head. What in the world is Trump doing? I showed you clip after clip where Trump says the reason why he went for Venezuela, China. The reason why he's going for Greenland, China. The reason why Iran, China. The real issue is not, I'm saying based on Bible prophecy, we don't look at the world. The world look and they wonder what Trump's doing. When you look at your Bible, you know it's the king of the north, king of the south. King of the north, the papacy, and its ally, America. King of the south, who is the king of the south? Which spirit? The spirit of atheism, communism. But hang on, communism has an ally. Question, does the papacy have an ally? Who's the papacy's ally that overthrew Soviet Union? The United States, Revelation 13, verse 12, that America exercised the power of the first beast, and he caused the earth and them that dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. So America is going to lead the world to worship the papacy. Now follow. If the world's going to worship the papacy, what must happen to communism? Because communism says there is no God. What must happen to communism? If America is going to fulfill its mission, what must America do to communism if America is going to fulfill its mission? It must make communism fall. Because question, if America enforces a Sunday law, China is not going to bow. Because China is still a strong power, so to speak. Now we study the collapse of empires. In the natural order of things, question, I'm saying the natural order of things, we studied collapse of an empire 250 years. We saw that whenever an empire is about to collapse, it starts borrowing money from the next superpower. Who did Britain borrow money from before Britain collapsed? America. Who is America borrowing money from today? China. We saw all this. In the natural order of things, China is the next superpower. That's the natural order of things if you look at history. But if you're a student of prophecy, then you know China cannot be a next superpower. That the United States of America is the last superpower.